George Kittle made it perfectly clear today, John, on Von Miller's podcast, how the 49ers locker room feels. He was very, I think, sympathetic to Trey Lance's plight. He said Trey hasn't really gotten a shot. He got a monsoon game, and then he got hurt. But Kittle said, with Brock, our offense has been operating at the highest level it's operated since probably 2019. And then he said twice, it's Brock's job to lose.
Yeah, which, listen, he's healthy. He's the starting quarterback come training camp. I think the only question is one angle that, assuming Brock's ready to go when training camp starts, is there even like a rep split? Like, is it like a 3-1, or is it just 100% Brock and he's just the number twos? I mean, that's a long way to go because he's going to get all the reps.
Yeah.
Now, granted, OTAs are kind of a joke. And I think it's pretty clear, like, Debo's not going to be there, right? Trent won't be there. Ayuk probably will be, but McCaffrey, I would say, is probably 50-50.
I'll make a prediction. They split reps, and part of it is Shanahan, who claimed that after 6 months, he was really happy because Purdy will be full go. They'll say, we're taking it a little easy with Brock's shoulder. And it's an easy way to split the reps. And even if he's 100%, you might do it anyway. But
one thing
I doesn't split reps. It's not how it works.
No. I think it'll be very whatever field work they get with the team environment and whoever's there will be like because clearly Trey last year was a little hit or miss, right? I think
practice, you're saying?
You and I and most people tried to be optimistic with it, but it was not like really crisp. And regardless what anyone on the outside said, all that mattered was internally they were nervous. Where can he just get to a point where it's like, God, he's a lot better than he looked last year, if that's the point. Because if it's the same, then I think they immediately just go to the 1-2 formula, where it's all whenever he's fully ready to go, right? If it's the same situation as last year, they would just go to the 1-2 formula if he's healthy. If he's gotten better, like, let's just see it compete, which we talked about. I don't think if the ball's flying all over the place that he's just getting reps. Once like training camp starts with Debo and Ayuk, assuming one guy's elbow can, maintain.
I think when we talk about compete for Trey, it's not in a 50-50 or you can go take Brock's job as the starter. I think it means compete to me means just put yourself in position. Even Brock said, I watched his interview with our guy Mike Yam on NFL Network, or even Trey said, he said Brock played too well to not have a spot. Now, did he mean the starting spot? I mean, he didn't really specify that.
Shout out to Mike Yam. I mean, he plays a big role. I see him all the time on NFL Network.
Yeah,
crushing it.
But even I think that Kittle quote is representative. Like, if you're Kyle, the starting quarterback job is so representative of team leadership. Like, the quarterbacks are almost required to be a leader, whether they're a leader or not, which leads to some guys pretending to be leaders, which is pretty transparent. But the quarterback position is just so different than every other. Steve Young had a good quote in the Wright Thompson article about Joe Montana, in which he said, if you get a bunch of if you get the 10 best quarterbacks in a room together, everyone's going to get kind of itchy about how do we compete? How do we prove who is the best guy in this group? And it reminded me of my buddy, Evan, who played in the NFL, who's always told me quarterbacks are just they're different because they think everybody is looking at them all the time, even when people aren't. He always compares them to the pretty girl in the group. They just always think it centers around them because a lot of this stuff does act. They're so used to it for years. You are placed in the center of the room and you are made a leader before you've ever done anything. That's just the way of the position. But Brock's done something here. Brock's been a leader and Brock's been a winner. And I just don't think Kyle can look into the eyes of his 9-man captain council and split reps between the two quarterbacks. I just don't think he can do it.
Well, I'd expect next year, assuming health, Brock Purdy to be a team captain, wouldn't you?
I would.
The way these guys talk about him.
Yeah.
And Trey, was thrust into it, and he's talked about it. I think I actually think he probably grew a lot this year of just emotional. I mean, he came from a small school. He got handed $35 million. And, I would say historically, like he was a unique prospect, but it's quarterback inflation, right? Like, should gas cost $7.50? Probably not, right? Should Trey Lance have been the number 3 pick? Based on like recent memory of like you had a draft historically in the draft, like the 90s, the guy probably goes in like a 3rd round, right? So it's just, there's an element of, it's just pretty crazy what gets thrown upon you these days. And rightfully so. I mean, it's just part of because if he does turn out to be it, it's well worth it. But as we've seen, like most guys do not, because it's very difficult to begin with, even if you are prepared. It's very hard. And I don't know if the money necessarily like changes who you are, and it feels like from a character standpoint they have no issue. But we're all human beings, right? You're probably in your head, you like get all this money guaranteed. You're just like, I'm the quarterback, but then you weren't the quarterback. It's just, it's been a weird situation.
Yeah.
And there's no way to avoid it. Like, I think their mindset was right on all these moves, whether the actual players were the right picks or not, time will tell. But it's just, until you just get a guy, like it was weird with Jalen Hurts and Carson Wentz for that first year, right? Things are weird until Jalen's our guy. Now, do you know what's not weird? The Jalen Hurts Gardner Minshew relationship. Like, it's just the hierarchy set. Because the 49ers, I think, but until like
there can't be an argument, right?
Well, he's just clearly the starter. Like, there's just the Niners, and even going into next year, I mean, they're going to be one of the biggest conversations in the league. Their quarterback hierarchy.
Yeah.
And we're probably even a year away. Even if Brock's playing, like, he's going to have to establish that he can play the entire year healthy. Can he continue to play at a high level? Like, is he going to just throw 32 touchdowns? Like, it's just, ultimately Jalen went from like, this year that they still got some picks. Like, could they take a guy to like, he's in the MVP conversation. So Jalen coming into this year, like, you would argue the Eagles hierarchy coming into this year before week 1 of 2022, their hierarchy big picture was not set. And he has just validated it, like, kind of, hey guys, I'm the fucking quarterback here. And you listen, one thing I've always seen is those Kelsey clips of him like Jason Kelsey, who pretty clear, like, Jason Kelsey wanted to be like a GM in the league. I mean, hell, he helps the Eagles evaluate offensive linemen. So it's like he loves the guy. And he's had a front row seat of like high level guys that probably overachieve like a Foles, an underachieving in a weird way Carson Wentz, to like Michael Vick. Like, he's seen it all. And this is the dude, man. Now, it doesn't mean he doesn't have some flaws or whatever. Most guys do. That's part of it too. And I got to do a better job of this. Like, when you talk, most guys, like Mahomes is an all-time outlier. Mahomes is even outlier relative to Joe Burrow. Like, Mahomes can do things that Joe can't physically, right? With his arm.
Yeah.
And obviously Joe is still in that high tier, but like, there's always going to be
make playoff mistakes. Even he is imperfect, right?
100%. I mean, Michael Jordan missed some shots, but I think like, if you don't have Elway, Montana, or Marino, it doesn't mean that you can't have a really, really successful team and just operation, right? Like, it's not like those guys won the title or they just had the market. Like, they were the only people that could win 11 games every year. Like, you can be really, really successful.
Your margin is just small. Your margin for error is just smaller if you don't have one of those guys.
100%.
I do think, and I thought you and I did a separate video about this that didn't end up on the podcast feed on Wednesday, which you can go watch if you want. But I thought Trey handled himself really well doing the interviews Wednesday. He seems like he's got a good outlook and mindset on it. I think what Kittle said was really good. Like, one of my big picture thoughts this offseason is going to be, and it seems like they're on the right page. Like, I don't think it benefits anybody to think or talk about Trey like he can't become the 49ers starting quarterback one day. He's very young still. He's 22, 23 in May. As long as he's on their team, and he's going to be on their team, there's a real possibility that he becomes their quarterback by injury, if nothing else. And Brock Purdy's played half a football season. So I believe in Brock Purdy. Brock should be the starter, but let's see him truly take the reins of being a starting quarterback before we say Trey Lance can't be the 49ers quarterback again. And maybe it happens not because he's great in the Jalen Hurts situation. Maybe it happens just because the other options aren't. But it doesn't benefit them at all to give up on Trey. Publicly or privately, internally. Like, that's what I would tell all these guys, just for the way they think. Like, guys, you might need Trey Lance again. The odds are actually good that you're going to need Trey Lance again. So I would
say it's pretty clear, though, they're not giving up on him in the sense of, like, no one's saying, like, he's got to go. Or
no. And it'd be crazy if they did say that. But I don't think it's healthy for them to even to think of him as anything other than the guy that might be starting a big game for them in 2023. That might happen.
I do think he survived. Like, let's just say Brock Purdy doesn't get injured. They beat the Eagles and they win the Super Bowl. I think there's probably a much greater opportunity. You basically just cook the books for him and you trade Trey Lance this offseason just to, like, go all in on Brock and then bring a veteran and do it. But that completely changed when the injury happened.
Yeah. You could also treat it the way the Packers have with Jordan Love, or, Jordan might be their starter, but hey, whatever. He's not that expensive. Let's keep him around. Maybe we can turn him into he is our guy and he's our backup quarterback right now. Like, it could be worse at backup quarterback.
Like, let's just say, and again, this sounds like sour grapes too, because it's not an option, but hypothetically they had beat the Eagles and then they win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Would you be behind them trading Trey Lance just to, like, make it easier on Purdy? What?
For 5 second-round picks?
Which in the NBA, that's like 6 7s.
Yeah, I'd be open to it, but to me, it would still be like, well, you're telling me that Trey Lance really helped Brock this year? Like, Trey was a really good teammate, right? Trey's talented. He is expensive for a backup quarterback if he's your backup quarterback, but I wouldn't just, like, what are my other options here? Okay, is Andy Dalton would that be a better option? Would McCoy be a better option? I would still, if that was the situation, and you tell me Trey was a great teammate and helped Brock, I'd be inclined to keep him around.
Yeah. I mean,
unless you told me you're getting a second-round pick for him, then I would.
I guess the difference, you remember, like, when Belichick cut Cam to sign, when Mac won the job, there's different elements when they're both young guys and they both like each other. Like, ultimately, one guy's super famous. There are just variables here that don't exist.
He's just so young. I would just be open to the possibility that he surprises you.
Yeah.
Like,
ultimately, the Warriors traded James Wiseman. Clearly, they don't think he's very good, but there's, like, next year he's going to make $12 million, right? And relative to their tax bill, it was really high. It was, like, financially, it made 0 sense. Like, financially, it makes 0 sense to get rid of Trey. If they had won the Super Bowl, if they hadn't won the Super Bowl, like, where they're sitting now, like, he's cheap. They've already paid the bonus, right? Like, that money on the cap, like, that's hitting the cap no matter what. So it actually, unless someone blows you away with a pick, it's like, well, fuck, they gave us 2 seconds. If you do the math, we're actually we net out, especially if we hit on one of the two guys, we might actually make money in this transaction. That is not the case. It would only be a negative if we get rid of this guy because we've already paid the money. And when you just, the way they look at it, you just combine him and Brock's salary. It's like our quarterback room is under $10 million, right?
Yeah. They'd be better off if there was some world where, like, they could send Trey to the G League and have him get a bunch of snaps,
What I just find fascinating, and his name's going to come up, a shitload in the next month, is I don't see how you could pay Jimmy Garoppolo and feel good about him playing all season long. Given because you got to pay him, like, even if the number was $20 million, like, that's a really, really expensive bridge quarterback. Like, sometimes, you see, like, down in Old Town Scottsdale, there are these nice condos. Well, the penthouse condo at this place is really expensive. It's like downtown San Francisco, that one Joe Montana had that kind of leaned to the side. It's like, well, if I'm downtown Old Town Scottsdale or in the marina or in fucking Manhattan, there are certain areas I don't mind paying a premium for the condo. But, like, there are certain areas, like, I'm sorry, this is way overpriced. Like, ultimately, I know Jimmy Garoppolo is not, like, premium real estate. So the price, to me, has to factor in. He is going to be the most just fascinating. I'm going to be able to, you could convince me of a lot of different angles with what's his contract. Like, if you told me he got, like, 1 year, $14 million, but incentives can get it to 30, be like, that's probably smart. If you tell me someone gives him, like, 2 years, $45 million, I'm like, that's kind of insane.
quarterback market is like the last drops of gas in the Mojave Desert. You know,
But here's the thing, though, Guy. It's pretty consistent when you're paying like the Glennons. I know Jimmy's better than that, but like in that stratosphere, it kind of is what it is. You know, like you can't like the best case scenario probably isn't even that great.
Yeah. But it's the old line. It's Ben Affleck's old line from the movie Argo, where they're trying to get a bunch of hostages out of Iran. Him and Bryan Cranston, and they take this idea to like bicycle a bunch of people over the border in the middle of winter. And they're like, "Is this the best idea you have?" And Ben Affleck goes, "Sir, of all of our bad ideas, this is by far the best idea." And I think that's kind of the quarterback market. It's like, well, okay, let's say we don't spend 45 on Jimmy Garoppolo. Who's our quarterback then? Andy Dalton? Like I've seen, say what you want. I've seen Jimmy in the NFC Championship game in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, but our team's not as good as the Niners, whoever I am.
Yeah, I mean, but you might be maybe think you can get there if you're, let's say it's Miami. And Mike McDaniel's just like, I just know this guy like the back of my hand. And
I got two guys that at any moment could get carted off the field.
Yeah. Yeah, you need to spend on your third stringer too. But
well, if I told you Jimmy Garoppolo went to Miami, what would the over-under you put on the quarterbacks carted off the field at if I gave you 0.5, are you taking the over?
Yeah, so you're saying Tua still is their quarterback?
Or just whatever. Just those are their two quarterbacks. They'll compete and they're both going to end up playing. Like, is a cart coming out from one of the two of them? A cart.
Yeah, of course it is. I hate to say it, but absolutely it is. Right?
How does Tua play next year without getting a concussion?